Hello and welcome to today's episode of Talk the Talk, RTR-FM's weekly show about linguistics, the science of language. For the next hour, we're going to be bringing you language news, language issues, and some really great tunes. Maybe we'll even hear from you. My name's Daniel Midgley. I'm here with Em Burrows. Em, nice to have you back.
Thank you very much.
And we're going to be talking about the week in linguistics. Later on, Ben Ainsley and I will be talking about the Irish language. And it's all happening on this episode of Talk the Talk. So, Em, what's going on this week?
In general, in my life, in linguistics. Well, I'll tell you what, there's actually this thing that's been in the news lately to do with the French language. Okay. And I'm sure you're across this.
Yes. I was astounded, actually. I couldn't believe it, but go ahead.
But okay, so traditionally, the French, or France as a country, has been very protective of its language, to the extent that some of its laws, in fact, determine how language evolves. So rather than taking versions of new words from other languages, the French prefer to come up with their own words that sound French.
Oh, yeah.
So in Japanese, for example, how English words are taken and given a Japanese spin, but it's still an English word, like basuketto boru or something like that.
Yeah, they're really enthusiastic users of English words.
Of English words, exactly. The French traditionally have been quite different, preserving their language and preserving their culture. But now it looks like things might actually be changing a little. So the Minister for Culture, her name's Fleur Pellerin. Pellerin. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I knew I was going to do something like that.
That's okay. You know what? You wait until you hear my Irish pronunciation. No. Okay, I must admit, I just was reading this on paper without thinking she was French. But anyway, okay, so Pellerin, she's actually saying that now the country needs to start look at enriching its language by taking influence from other countries. So rather than using uniquely French words, to actually incorporate some of the other words into the French language. This is quite a coup. I can't believe, so to speak, yes.
Yes,
I can't believe it. I thought the Smiths would get back together before I would hear anything like this from France. Because keep in mind, there's the Académie Française. They call themselves the Immortals.
Okay? Is that right?
This is because whenever one dies, another one replaces them. And they've tried for decades to stomp out English loanwords like le week-end, le parking, un relooking. And so let me just read some of the comments. This culture minister sounds like a linguist. She says, the French language is not frozen. A language is always evolving. Oh, my gosh. That's the kind of thing I would say, right?
Yeah.
Certain languages like English today and Italian in the past have shown themselves particularly generous in offering French hundreds of new words. That's an interesting spin on it, isn't it? French is not in danger, she continues, and my responsibility as minister is not to erect ineffective barriers against language, but to give all our citizens the means to make it live on.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, she's spot on there.
Yeah.
Which is great.
And French linguists are also very pleased about this. Imagine the kind of things that they've had to put up with from all these prescriptivists trying to hold the language in place, and it hasn't really worked.
That's so interesting.
On the other hand, Italian.
Yeah.
Italians have launched a campaign against English. They're trying to keep out loan words. Now, let me just give you a sense of what Italian English words are like. They use the phrase baby gang to describe a bunch of teenage delinquents.
Right.
You got a baby gang in the street.
Yeah.
When there's a sex shop, they would call it a sexy shop.
Yeah.
Which I kind of like.
Yeah.
And then, of course, everyone knows instead of jogging, they call it footing.
That's right. Yes, I've heard that one.
Very common in French, too, I think.
Oh, is it? Ah.
And then for a creche or a daycare center, it's a baby parking.
That's brilliant. That's what it is. Let's be honest.
Isn't it really? Come on. But there's been a petition calling on Italians to get rid of Italian loanwords from English, and it's got 70,000 signatures and the backing of the Accademia della Crusca, which is a research institute. Here's what the president says. We don't want to declare war on English, but we do want to remind the Italian speakers that in many cases there are convenient words in Italian that can be used.
Yes, yeah.
So you can sense a little bit of nervousness here.
That's interesting.
And then here's the crazy part. I was on the CNN website and I found this article. It's called Dante Turns in His Grave as Italian Language Declines.
Wow, it's such a heinous thing that Dante is.
Doesn't it just sound like the kind of thing that English speakers would say? Here, I'll just read the first a few lines. Now, I don't want you to take this too seriously, by the way, before I read this. Believe it or not, the land where Latin originated and from which many other European languages descend is becoming illiterate.
Not only have Italians long forgotten the language of their Roman Empire, but they hardly know how to speak and write proper Italian.
Oh, my gosh.
Isn't this an English sort of complaint?
Yeah.
She continues, if you take a look at Italian language forums and debate websites, it's clear that many Italians are clueless on grammar and don't even know how to use verbs properly.
Wow.
This is the kind of thing that English speakers love to do, but it's just as bogus. A native speaker of Italian or English has a great knowledge of the grammar of the language. It's in our heads, even if we're not able to explicitly talk about the sort of rules. So my advice is, come on, Italy, grow up.
Yeah.
And just for fun, I thought I would bring some words in English just to show Italy that, hey, come on, English speakers, we love Italian words. There are so many Italian words that we have in English. Maybe, it's not such a big deal. We still are English and
nice.
We think it's okay. So here are some words you didn't know were Italian.
Okay, right.
Now everybody knows all the food words.
Yes,
right?
sure.
Okay, none of those. How about colonel, the military rank with an L?
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's an Italian word, and it's kind of French too. It comes from an Italian word which is colonnella, which has an L, but then eventually the French took it over and gave it an R. And in fact, people said the R form and the L form side by side quite a while in the 17th and 18th centuries. But eventually in English, we settled on the French pronunciation, but the Italian spelling.
Yeah.
And that's why colonel has an L. There's another one, manage. To manage something comes from Italian maneggiare, especially to control a horse, but the man part means, well, yeah, you got to manage if you're on that horse. Comes from the Latin hand.
Yeah.
What's another one? Sedan, which possibly comes from a southern Italian dialect, which there was a word, sede, meaning chair. If you're a humanist, that comes from Italian umanista, a student of human affairs or human nature. And then fiasco, which is an Italian stage term, far fiasco, which means to suffer a complete breakdown in performance, but it literally means to make a bottle.
Yeah. How interesting.
To make a bottle of something.
Yeah.
Have you ever made a bottle on stage?
Look at us go, bridging cultural gaps and showing people how it's done.
That's right. And we use these words, and we're big word importers, and we don't seem to mind. It doesn't make us any less English, and it doesn't make Italian any less
No, that's
Italian.
Right, exactly.
So if we could just all calm down, let language do what it's going to do. We can't control the brains of millions of speakers. It's okay.
You heard it here first, RTR-FM with Daniel Midgley.
Let's take a track. I wanted to play a song by Perth band Husband on RTR-FM 92.1. More talk after this.
Through my love, across the tracks, my love raged and your love lacked. Time had sown those tender cracks, but love lost reigned on a small man tracks. Dreams that I've told. She's got new hair and all new clothes, saying no in your sweetest tune. My life was free for you to mourn. I took a plane and 20 trains, 100 million miles away. In your grasp I was cold, and knowing has captured me more. See the red dust that I know. With open arms she always welcomes me home. I am a creature and I'm roaming free. Perhaps I brought you back here with me. I took a plane and 20 trains, 100 million
What a great track there from Husband. That was the track Caught off of their album The Money here on RTR-FM 92.1. You're here with Talk the Talk with Daniel and Em.
Hello.
And recently Ben and I had a chat about the Irish language. I don't suppose you are an Irish language speaker?
No, funnily enough. I think I can say cheers. Is it slancha or something like that?
I think that's
that's
correct.
Probably about all I've ever heard.
I was impressed by your Swedish pronunciation.
Oh, thank you. That's taken a bit of practice. It's hard.
Good job. So, first of all, a lot of thanks to Ciarán O'Brenoin, the author of My Language Diary. His blog is something that you really ought to check out. He was good enough to help me out with some stories and help me with my Irish pronunciation. Still, I apologize in advance for anyone's ears that I hurt. All the errors are mine. Remember that if you have any comments about what you hear, or you want to tell us things that you know about the Irish language, you can talk to us. We might read your comments out on the air. Em, how can they reach us?
They can give us a call in the studio. It's 9260-9210, or send an email to studio@rtrfm.com.au, or tweet.
Yes, we are at TalkRTR, and don't forget our Facebook page.
The Irish language is attracting a lot of attention. It's now a major player among minority languages, but even so, it's a surprisingly contentious topic for many. Linguist Daniel Midgley finds out what it's all about on this episode of Talk the Talk. Word.
Or should I say focal, which means word in Irish.
Now, okay, so first thing, I reckon there's some people out there who don't even know that Irish exists as a language.
What, like that it's just all English all the time?
Well, you could be forgiven for reaching that conclusion based on meeting any Irish person ever in our lifetime.
Of course, there are Irish folks who are native speakers of Irish.
Mm-hmm. Before we get too far into that, why don't you regale me with the news in linguistics this week?
I sometimes run across a political issue that just gets my dander up, and this is one.
What political issue has piqued your interest this week?
There's an article from Greg Dixon from Fully Sick, Crikey.com's language blog, which is really great. Everybody should check it out. It's about prisoners who speak Arabic. They've been banned.
What, as in Australian prisoners?
It seems that there are 13 prisoners in New South Wales who are speakers of Arabic, but when they're making phone calls or when they've got visitors, they're going to be forced to use English.
That is an odd thing to enforce. I guess they're doing the classic, like, crazy Australian on the bus. Oh, I don't like those people speaking a language I can't understand. They could be up to all sorts of business.
It's especially odd because there isn't any sort of specific terrorist threat that they've got.
Yeah, right. They just, like, they're prisoners who happen to be Arabic.
Mm.
It's not like they're the terrorist prisoners.
No, not particularly, no. And Greg Dixon points out that this might actually be illegal because under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, to which Australia is a signatory, Article 26 forbids discrimination on the basis of language, and Article 27 says, in those states in which ethnic, religious, or linguistic minorities exist, persons belonging to such minorities shall not be denied the right to use their own language.
Funny thing about that, though, is that both sides of government seem to treat signing international conventions for things as a bit more of a like, oh yeah, I guess we'll try.
Particularly when the rights of minorities, and especially prisoners, it's not politically popular to sort of go to bat for the rights of prisoners. I don't think this is about the rights of prisoners. I think this is about the rights of linguistic minorities who happen to be prisoners.
Right.
It's unconscionable and probably illegal. And I think that if there's a concern about using Arabic in prison, I think we should take the suggestion of Joe Caputo, who's head of the Federation of Ethnic Community Councils of Australia, who says if they're worried, they should have bilingual people running the place. How about that?
Well, I would say let justice take its course, but as we have seen here in Australia, that when we do dickish things to minorities, well, then that'll probably just continue to happen. So good on you, Australia.
Just one more thing, isn't it?
Let's get out of Australia for the time being then, Daniel.
Okay, and how about making the track The Postal Service with This Place is a Prison?
On RTR-FM 92.1, The Sound Alternative, Ben and Daniel with you for Talk the Talk. More right after this.
the Postal Service with This Place is a Prison on RTR-FM 92.1.
And it's time for us to get a little Irish, although we humbly swear that we will do no terrible, phony Irish accents at any point in this podcast. So if you're Irish and you're listening and you're just like, it's coming, it's not coming.
No, it's not coming.
It's totally not coming.
We got a lot of respect because, we wanted to celebrate Seachtain na Gaeilge.
Yep.
Irish Language Week.
Of course.
You knew that, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was always confused about the name. Have you ever noticed that there's lots of names for this language floating around? There's Irish, there's Gaelic.
Well, I wanted to clarify that. I'm going to guess that is Gaelic not a little bit like the Latin of a bunch of different languages that existed in the British Isles? Like once upon a time there was Gaelic and now there's sort of like Scottish Gaelic and Irish Gaelic and all these different kind of sub-groupings, or am I completely off base?
Gaelic is a term that applies to a lot of different languages in the area, and in fact Gaelic is kind of a language group for a lot of Celtic languages.
Right, which, depending on who you ask, they could be dialects of a thing or languages in their own right.
No, it turns out that Irish Gaelic and Scots Gaelic are not the same thing at all.
Okay,
They're different languages.
We just used the word Gaelic to describe them all.
Right. So is it Irish or Gaelic or Irish Gaelic? Answer, it's Irish.
Okay.
The language is Irish. Just like we call the German language German and German speakers call it Deutsch, we call the Irish language Irish and they call it Gaelic.
Oh, okay, cool. I get that. That's a thing that I can wrap my head around.
You can call it Irish Gaelic if you want to distinguish from Scottish Gaelic, which is a different language, but really there's no need, just call it Irish.
Now, as we said in our intro, Irish has always existed in this funny space. Like, some people could be very much forgiven for not knowing it exists because I personally have never, and I've travelled, I've never met a person who spoke Irish, fluent Irish.
And did you know that there are exactly 1,895 Irish speakers in Australia?
I am shocked and amazed.
Me too. As for Ireland itself, however, it seems that about 41% of Irish people said in the last census that they can speak Irish to some extent. It's the first language for a lot of people living in the Gaeltacht, which means the Irish-speaking region.
Ah, right.
There are these regions that are set up as being totally Irish-speaking. Your first language, and in shops, there it is.
I had always laboured under the apparent misimpression that that sort of environment didn't exist for Irish, whereas it does for Welsh.
It actually does for Irish as well, although, unfortunately, in fact, the Gaeltacht, that was a bit of a there, the Gaeltacht was set up in the 1920s and 30s, and it was doing pretty well for a while, although the number of people that live in the exclusively Irish-speaking zone has been kind of dwindling over the years.
Am I also possibly correct in guessing that maybe younger people are getting a little bit rarer and rarer in these places as well?
Yes, in one way, and no in another.
Mm-hmm.
As the influence dwindles a little bit in the exclusively Irish-speaking areas, the interest is also increasing in the more general English-speaking areas. I tell you what, there is one aspect of Irish that has always befuddled me, and that is the spelling.
Okay. I'm going to rap with you for a second, Daniel. I'm going to do a thing. I'm going to do a patented Ben Ainsley, totally homebrew, almost certainly incorrect theory.
What are you doing?
Okay. There are a bunch of languages in that region of the world that I hypothesize are broadly based on the same root language, and I'm going to name those languages now, okay?
Okay.
Gaelic, Welsh, French.
French?
French.
French is not a Celtic language.
But Gauls. Gaelic.
No. Gaelic sounds like Gaelic, but that's just a coincidence.
But, okay, and here's where my hypothesis, because I'm not done yet.
I'm listening.
Those three languages, all very, very supremely weirdly spelt to an English eye. And I feel like it's because they're all connected somehow.
Are you trying to blame the French for Irish spelling?
No, yes.
I thought you might. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty. First of all, you've noticed that there's a lot of H's.
Yes.
For example, the girl's name, Niamh.
Yeah.
Naoimh.
Also, Siobhan.
Oh, tell me about Siobhan.
Siobhan.
Yeah. Seems strange, but actually there's a system to it. So here's what's going on. You know how in English we take a P and we put an H after it, and that P becomes F?
Yes, it's.
Okay.
I'm speaking for all people in the 3rd to 5th grade here. It's a dumb rule, but yes, I know what it is.
Okay, well, what that H does is it makes the P aspirated. And let me tell you what I mean by that.
It means the P really wants to succeed in life, right?
No, what it means is the P is puffed out with a breath of air more than usual. When people used a PH, it was supposed to sound like P, which sounded, I guess, enough like F.
For it to just mold over
people
time.
Just used it and it melded together. Well, this is kind of how it goes here. So if you have a P and an H in Irish, you pronounce it like an F.
Okay.
If you have a T and an H, then it sounds like
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
That's almost totally aspirated.
Yep.
And then if you've got a C and an H, like a K sound but with an H, how would that sound?
Ka.
Yeah, what kind of a ch?
Ha. Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay, cool, I get that.
And F and H are totally silent, and I don't know why.
I'm so glad that there's those same ridiculous, just like iceberg rules in Irish as well that English has. Just every now and then there'll be like and also we kind of do this.
Sometimes.
And it just doesn't really have an explanation.
Don't really know why. So I guess I'm still kind of confused. I think really the best way to get Irish spelling is to see and hear just hundreds of examples and then build your intuition that way.
Well, I mean, not unlike most other language learning, I guess.
Well, including English. By the way, if you thought that spelling was tricky, we're getting to see it after the 1948 spelling reforms.
Whoa. Holy crap. Well, do we need to take some time to sort some things out?
Yeah, I think so. This track comes from a band out of Belfast. This is Girls' Names with Hypnotic Regression.
On RTRFM 92.1.
Girls' Names, Hypnotic Regression on RTR-FM 92.1.
And if you're just joining us, we are Talk the Talk, Ben and Daniel. Every week we jump into matters linguistic, and this week we are hip deep in the Irish bog that is the Irish language. Now, you brought this up this week because you said there's some positive signs, there's some movement on the station in terms of Irish sort of getting its feet back together.
There is, but there's still a lot of ground to make up, and the reasons for this are partly historical. Let's take a walk back in history for a second.
Such a happy history for Ireland as well.
Oh dear. Well, it's a Celtic language and one of the Indo-European languages. Mm-hmm. It was the majority language in Ireland until about the 1800s.
So historically speaking, not that long ago, but as we know with language, that breadth of time can be a death sentence to a language easily.
Well, it wasn't just that. It was also, of course, the British influence. About the 16th, 17th century, the British had a lot of control over Ireland, and this meant the end of Irish as a language of power and administration. And by the 1830s, there was the establishment of the national school system, which was exclusively English. Irish students were forbidden to speak their language, beaten if they got caught using it. However, there was a pretty intense nationalistic movement in the late 1800s, and people started taking an interest again, both in language and in literature. But even so, the uptake of Irish is a surprisingly polarizing issue.
Why so?
Well, there are a few reasons. First of all, there's a debate over whether Irish should be taught in school.
Okay.
As you can imagine, that's going to be a flashpoint. Some people are going to be like, yes, absolutely. And other people are like, no way, why should our kids be learning a language? And then you just insert whatever nasty thing you want to say about the Irish language here.
Right.
Some people
it's not going to get them anywhere.
It's a dying language. Yeah. It's an outdated language.
Why don't we just teach them Latin?
And none of that's really true. In the meantime, at the administrative level, there's been a lot of public support for Irish, but also a lot of lip service.
Okay, so it's probably a bit fashionable to tie the sort of, you could see how it would be a very juicy piece of low-hanging fruit to grab, but then not actually have to do anything with.
Yeah, and one language commissioner has already resigned in response to the government's perceived failure to make legislation to improve the lot of Irish.
Brutal.
Yep. And then, last year, a young man was arrested for speaking Irish. Well, not exactly.
Yeah, I feel like there's another part to that story.
What happened was that he was stopped in relation to something having to do with road traffic.
Oh, I know where this is going. This is awesome.
Go for it.
He was stopped for something to do with traffic, and he would only speak in Irish to the person who was asking him probably very important legal questions. And so they decided, oh, you want to get smart with me, young man? Well, here's the inside of a paddy wagon.
You must have read the news article, because that's exactly what happened. Found himself in handcuffs until somebody could be found that was able to speak Irish with him.
Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and presume that this man knew how to speak English but refused to.
This does happen every once in a while. Didn't it happen with Hawaiian a few years ago? Mm-hmm. I remember this.
And you know what? I kind of like it. First of all, I kind of like it because there's a little part of a tiny dying anarchist inside me that's still like, oh yeah, fight the system, woo!
Screw the man.
But more broadly, I like this idea of kind of going, well, it is the language of here, and if you want to deal with me, then you should speak it, or find someone who can.
Well, if you like that story, you're going to love this story.
Oh, yes! All right, let's go.
There's a woman by the name of Leah Ní Riada, and she's a member of the European Parliament. Mm-hmm. And she is justifiably miffed at the EU's refusal to recognize Irish as one of the translatable languages of the EU. She says, "It angers me when I sit in Parliament and I'm told at the beginning of each meeting that an interpretation service is available in each language. Of course, Irish is excluded and ignored." So, guess what she decided to do as part of Irish Language Week?
She delivered all of the things that she had to say in Irish.
And she was promptly shut down.
Colleagues, sorry. Unfortunately, according to the implementation of the decision of the Bureau that decided a waiver on the Irish Gaelic translation, there is no translation available. Sorry, no, that is not allowed a consecutive translation by assistant according to the rule of the Parliament. So if you use another language, or unfortunately I'm not able to leave you the floor.
Wow. Burn.
Yep. In English, all, by the way. So we have a ways to go. But still, Irish is on its way up. Now, we've already mentioned in shows previous, you can now learn Irish on Duolingo. And also Gmail has it as one of the language options.
Good on Gmail.
I want to mention a couple of other encouraging things because language revitalization is always about the kids, right?
I was just about to ask, what are the little uns doing?
Well, there's a YouTube channel and a website called TG Lurgan. There's even an app for it. What it does is it has contemporary pop songs, but with lyrics translated into Irish. So,
heck yes.
And it's also a bit of a summer camp where kids make these music video versions, kind of like Glee, of English language hits.
That is a smart move on the part of someone because kids love doing that, as far as I can tell.
There's also a football club established for Irish speakers in Dublin, where there are men's and women's teams in hurling and in Gaelic football.
I don't know lots about sports, but I would imagine that their vocabulary during sport would consist of maybe 100 words, most of which were swear words.
Hey, maybe that would be like a version of the language that would be easy to grip onto.
True, rudimentary, because you need it to be instantly understandable and yellable and all these sorts of things.
Limited domain, yeah.
I like it.
Let me just take a second and thank Ciarán O'Brenoin of My Language Diary. You should check out his blog. He's a teacher of Irish and helped me out a lot with a lot of information that I used for today's show. So thanks very much.
How do you say thank you in Irish, Daniel?
Guref Madagot.
There's nothing hipper in this world than an obscure band from a different country that you haven't heard of before. Why don't we play one?
Okay, this is an Irish band called The Gloaming. This track is called Necklace of Wrens, or in Irish, Muinca Nrolini.
On RTRFM 92.1 The Sound Alternative. Stick around. Word of the week.
The Gloaming with Muinka Nrolini, which translates to Necklace of Wrens. That's an Irish track on RTR FM 92.1.
And like Icarus, flying too close to the sun and the wax in his wings melting, we plummet back towards the earth into the embracing arms that is Word of the Week.
There was one vocabulary item that dominated the news this week. It is lifestyle choice.
I was even going to say this to you.
So this week, the WA state government has chosen to defund about 150 Aboriginal communities in WA.
Good work, WA government.
Nice
Sarcasm.
going.
Sarcasm.
The federal government said it was going to turn over funding to the states in the next 2 years. So they said, we're just going to shut them down. No, we're done. The Prime Minister said, what we can't do is endlessly subsidize lifestyle choices if those lifestyle choices are not conducive to the kind of full participation in Australian society that everyone should have.
Couple of things. That statement, Daniel, I'm just going to run with them. First of all, the lifestyle choices in inverted air quotes, because it's a ridiculous thing to say and it should not have been said, that they're referring to, which is to say people in remote and regional communities, Indigenous communities, could we not call that OG Australian society?
You mean like the real, authentic, first kind of lifestyle choice?
It feels like there was an Australian society, and then we came along, and now there's a different kind of Australian society, but there's a bunch of people who are living more or less akin to what once was, or at least as close to as they are able in the world that we have created around them. I kind of think they're entitled to that, just quietly.
I think it's very sweet that Tony Abbott's life offers him choices.
Yeah. You know what else it smacks of?
What?
Smacks of those really annoying people who are like, being gay is a choice.
Okay.
Just, it reminds me of that.
That's kind of where the term lifestyle choice first comes up.
No, really?
It does.
Oh my God.
It starts to appear in the 70s as people were trying to describe different ways of living that might be a bit different but still valid. And I found lots of references to people wondering if homosexuality was really a characteristic of a person, or was it a lifestyle choice?
Oh, so it was like an early euphemistic kind of phrasing?
Very much.
Right.
Then the term caught on in a big way in the early 90s when, if I say the TV character Murphy Brown, does that mean anything to you?
It does, but only because I was raised in the States.
Okay, well, this character on TV, the show was written so that she had a baby without a husband. Culture warriors freaked out, and they derided this choice for a woman to do this as a really big deal, and not just a lifestyle choice that somebody could go and do. Senator in the U.S. Joe Lieberman in 1998 gave a quote when he was excoriating Bill Clinton over his infidelity in the White House. Listen to this quote. "This, unfortunately, is all too familiar territory for America's families in today's anything-goes culture, where sexual promiscuity is too often treated as just another lifestyle choice with little risk of adverse consequences."
The phrase itself, lifestyle choice, the way it's being used by the people who use it, suggests a level of innocence. Right? Like a lifestyle choice is like, am I vegetarian?
Or maybe getting a boat.
Right? But each of these people, when they say it, they're robbing something that isn't that of legitimacy.
Right. It's a way of trivializing the cultural patterns of people we disapprove of. And in fact, the words that seem to occur over and over again are just another lifestyle choice or not just another. So Tony Abbott's using this to make the choice of Aboriginal people to live on country, like they've done for generations upon generations, on a par, like with these other things.
Like buying a boat.
Yeah, like buying a boat or drinking Merlot or something like that. I think that lifestyle choice is a bit of an intentional misnomer. I think maybe we could instead use the phrase way of life. Which is that. It's another equally evocative phrase. For these Aboriginal folks living on country,
is a way of life.
It's a way of life. It's not
Absolutely.
a lifestyle choice.
Daniel, always a pleasure.
Let's do it again next time.
What shall we be played out to?
Let's close it off with Kaki King with her track Life Being What It Is.
Catch you in the same place next week.
I'll be here.
See you then.
You're here on RTR-FM 92.1 on Talk the Talk, and that was a chat I had with Ben Ainsley recently, but now I'm here with Em Burrows, coming at you live from Studio B.
Hello. Very interesting, I thought, that one.
What caught your attention?
Well, obviously because of all the things I've been talking about this morning on the program, the lifestyle choice thing I thought was really, really interesting.
Let's just take a second and review that. We're talking about the closure of Aboriginal remote communities. From a linguistic perspective, this is just awful policy. I mean, it's awful in a lot of ways. But
absolutely. Yeah.
What kind of things, other things besides linguistics did you talk about, if you wouldn't mind?
This morning I talked about essentially things to do with a sense of identity and place, and particularly for Aboriginal people, the connection with the land, spiritual connection, the ancestral home. But just for anybody, how important place is to your sense of self and your mental well-being and your security and all that sort of stuff as a foundation for being able to, A, for cultural solidarity, but B, for being able to make decisions in your life and take ownership of your life. It's a foundation that everybody needs. And how dangerous it's going to be for so many people. Like we talked this morning about, mental health, the impact of being removed from these communities on the mental health of people who live there.
Socially and health-wise.
Socially, exactly, psychologically, all that sort of stuff. It's a massive issue.
And linguistically, once again, forced removal is one of the reasons why Australian languages have declined so much in the last couple of centuries. It's really a case of linguistic genocide, and I don't mind using that word.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing that happens in big ways and in little ways. Let me tell you a story from Canada's Northwest Territory. There's a Chippewa family who has been prevented from writing their baby's name correctly on her birth certificate. And the reason is that it is a Chippewa name, and of course Chippewa being a Native American language has different sounds in it than perhaps English does. Actually, that's not really true because we do have a sound for this. It's just not a letter. If I say glottal stop, does that mean anything?
Yep.
Okay, tell me about a glottal stop here.
I'm not sure. It's something to do with it. No, well, it happens in your throat.
Yep.
Is it? Yeah, it's a sound in the throat.
That's the one. We use it all the time in words like oh, do you see you hear what I did in the middle there? I pinched off my throat, squeezed it tight. Or instead of saying the character Batman with a T, I always say Batman. Right?
Yeah,
and there's a pause there. So that's a glottal stop. And if you write it using the symbols that linguists do, it looks a bit like a question mark.
Right.
They wanted to put that in there for their daughter's name. The name is Shahai'a May Talbot, and the name means when the sun just peeks through.
Yeah, that's lovely, yeah.
But the government isn't letting them do it because you can only use Roman characters. And the mom says, I want to be able to fight this, to be able to have my daughter's name written the right way, the way it's supposed to be. She says, I don't want to sacrifice my language just because of this. So I guess if we had a theme for today's show, it would be linguistic minority rights.
Yep.
These are things that are important to uphold. If you're a believer in language diversity, then this is something we should be getting behind. If you think that language diversity is something dumb and inconvenient and it's something that shouldn't exist so that we can have ease of administration in government forms, then this won't be a big issue to you. But if you think of what it must be like, say, if English disappeared tomorrow, how would that be? Everything that we know lost. We would feel very strongly about that. This is how people feel about their language.
Understandable.
Speaking of language learning, we have a viewer mail.
Oh, great.
Hooray. Yay, we love viewer mail. This is from Andre, who emailed us on talkthetalk@rtrfm.com.au. He says, I don't understand why you keep promoting Duolingo. Right. Which is a language learning site. He says, for me, the idea of learning a language through translation is a bit stupid. Now, I have to point out that what you do on Duolingo is you learn by taking sentences in the target language, like Italian or whatever, and converting them to English or back.
Okay.
And he says, translation as the main approach to language learning is not a good idea. What you want to achieve when you learn a second language is to see the world through the eyes of a speaker of the other language. That is, use their semantic categories when perceiving and talking about the world. It's best to cut the middleman out, especially if that middleman has his own way of structuring the world. Now, I don't know if you've used Duolingo.
I haven't actually, no.
It's a thing that a lot of people sort of use and then put away after a few weeks.
Yeah.
When I saw Duolingo, I thought, what a cool idea, teach people language and then get people to translate. But then when I realized that they were using the old grammar translation method that I used to learn Latin way back in the day, I thought, this is crazy. Have they missed out on 100 years of language learning? And it's usually considered better for dead languages. Now we look at communication in classes and talking.
Of course, yeah.
So that's what he's talking about. Here's why I changed my mind, and I think Duolingo is actually probably okay. First of all, it allows learners to go at their own pace.
Yep.
Right? You can get on the computer and do it the way you want to. Another thing is it doesn't force you to output anything, at least most of the time. And you'd think that is bad, but actually it can be quite good if you're a nervous speaker. It also offers something very good, and that's comprehensible input. But I think one of the best things is it appeals to learners' intrinsic motivation. I mean, people sometimes ask, what's the best kind of exercise to do? And I say, well, it's the kind that you will do.
Yes, whatever works for you, of course, yeah.
And so what's the best way to learn a language? Well, I admit that getting in the scene and, getting in there and talking to people is really, really good, and being immersed, that'll probably stick longer. But if you're a casual, if you're not that into the culture, or you just want to do it for fun, I think that doing it a fun way is good. And, we've spent a long time in language learning trying to find out what the best method is, but we have kind of realized that what really seems to matter is what the learner brings, not so much the method that we use. So I figure, among a lot of different methods, Duolingo and other language computer programs like that isn't that bad. And in fact, they have the results to show that it's just about almost as good as a semester at uni.
Oh, there you go.
So if it's what you do, then
it's got some merits. Yeah, sure.
Hey, we're at the end of this episode of Talk the Talk. If you want to find links to all the stuff we've talked about, you can find it on our blog, www.talkthetalkpodcast.com. There's a post for every episode, and you can leave comments. You can also leave comments on our Facebook page. We like it when you like us. Em, thanks for being on the show with me today.
Thank you. It's been great.
This has been an RTRFM podcast. RTRFM is an independent community radio station that relies on listeners for financial support. You can subscribe online at rtrfm.com.au/subscribe.
You can also subscribe to Talk the Talk on iTunes and even leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at TalkRTR. Email us on talkthetalk@rtrfm.com.au. And find all our episodes on our blog, www.talkthetalkpodcast.com. I sometimes run across a political issue that just gets my dander up, and this is one.
Is it Tony Abbott biting an onion? Skin on.
What is that? Who does that? Who does that?
The guy next to him was like, "Oh yeah, we normally skin him."